Hey my friends, how's it going? It's Ultimus, and today we are going to be talking about Unholy Death Knights, their abilities, talents, and PvP talents. Now, we've already briefly looked at Unholy Death Knights, specifically the artifact tree, but of course, that does not cover all of the other abilities that we're going to be having, and so I thought now would be high time to take a look at that and see what Blizzard is bringing to the table for Unholy Death Knights. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First and foremost, for Unholy Death Knights specifically, we need to look at their abilities. And so, baseline at level 1, which is weird because, of course, we start at level 55, so I don't know what the 1 is there for, but hey, there it is. Runic Corruption. When you spend runic power, you have a 1% chance per runic power spent to increase your rune regeneration rate by 100% for 3 seconds. So, no longer a talent. Baseline. Kind of nice, and again gives you an incentive to continually spend runic power rather than saving it necessarily. I mean, there's going to be times and places I think where you want to save up and store that runic power for bigger attacks, but overall you want to constantly be rotating through it, very much so like a warrior with rage. It's one of the few similarities Death Knights and warriors share. Death Coil. 30 runic power, instant cast, fires a bolt of unholy energy at the target, causing 0.80 times 1.1 of attack power. I'm not sure how all that math stuff works out. I'm not an expert when it comes to all that. Shadow damage. So again, basically functions exactly the same, at least from my look here at it. You're going to shoot an unholy bolt at an enemy, and I would imagine you would still be able to heal your ghoul with it, but that's yet to be seen. You might have to glyph for it. Death's Advance. Increase movement speed by 15%. Raise Dead requires Death Knight Unholy. Raises basically an undead ghoul to fight by your side. You can have a maximum of 1, and of course with the glyph of Geist you can use to change it to look like a Geist. Scourge Strike. Cost 1 rune and 10 runic power. Remember for Death Knights that they are being reduced to a simpler rune system. No more managing frost runes, unholy runes, and blood runes, and of course when they turn into death runes it's just runes. So no longer needing to worry about cycling through all that, which I think removes a lot of the clunky feel from Death Knights. That was probably always my biggest complaint with them, and I won't go on to that rant and tangent again because we've done it in pretty much every other Death Knight video we've done, but I think it's a good thing, and so just keep that in mind when we're going through looking at these abilities, that they're just going to say 1 rune on them, or 2 runes depending on what the cost is. An Unholy Strike that deals 140% physical damage and 70% shadow damage. Triggers a single attack of Festering Wound if it is present on the target. So Scourge Strike is going to be one of your major attacks that triggers the Festering Wound. And so you're going to want to manage those, and that's going to be one of your most important dots as an Unholy Death Knight, but we will get into that, of course, as we go down the list here. Festering Strike costs 2 runes. Deals 440% physical damage and inflicts the target or infects the target with 1 to 3 festering wounds. And Festering Wound is a pestilent lesion that may burst or be burst by Scourge Strike, dealing 47.3% of attack power, shadow damage, and generating 3 runic power. So Festering Wound is going to be a very important core part of your rotation as an Unholy Death Knight. You're going to want to manage those, get as many stacks of those on. You're going to want to use them to your advantage and know when to take advantage of that and basically burst them on the target so you can get the most out of that. Of course, dealing the dot damage and refunding the runic power as well. Definitely gives Death Knights a higher incentive to cast or use Scourge Strike, because sometimes I feel like it can get lost in the rotation as not something that's really a priority. So using that, I think, or having Pestilent Wounds is going to give us a reason to cast Scourge Strike personally. Festering Wound, again, we just went over that. A Pestilent Legion that may burst by Scourge Strike, dealing 47.3% of attack power, shadow damage, and generating 3 runic power. Dark Sucker, Sakur, I don't even know, I can never pronounce that properly, it doesn't even matter. When you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor, your next death strike within 20 seconds is free, and its healing is increased by 100%. So almost like a Warrior's Victory Rush, just a little bit better. Death and Decay cost 1 rune, corrupts the ground targeted by the Death Knight, causing 12% of attack power times 10 maybe? Possibly. Shadow damage over 10 seconds to targets within the area while you remain within the targeted area. Your Scourge Strike or Blood Strike will hit all nearby enemies. So an added bit of functionality there to Death and Decay. It's something that we haven't seen before in the game. But that is while you as a Death Knight are standing in your Death and Decay, it's going to add a little bit more of an AoE functionality to your Scourge Strike or Blood Strike. And Blood Strike, if I'm not mistaken, is simply a Blood Death Knight ability. So for Unholy Death Knights, of course, it's going to be Scourge Strike. So that alone is kind of cool because, again, if you can get multiple targets with your Festering Wounds on there, then you're going to be able to hit all those targets with your Scourge Strike and therefore burst them, increasing maximum damage, runic power refund, and I'm just imagining that's how it's going to work. If that doesn't work like that, I will be severely disappointed, and I'll be wondering what Blizzard is thinking. But it seems to be the case. Chains of Ice, 1 rune, shackles the target with frozen chains, reducing movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds. Then Sudden Doom, your auto attacks have a chance to make your next death coil cost no runic power. So we're seeing a lot of these abilities function pretty much the same way. Icebound Fortitude, 3-minute cooldown. The Death Knight freezes his blood or her blood to become immune to stun effects and reduce all damage taken by 20% for 8 seconds. Dark Transformation, 1-minute cooldown, transforms your ghoul into a powerful undead monstrosity for 20 seconds. The ghoul's abilities are empowered and take on a new function while the transformation is active. Okay, Summon Gargoyle, sounds exactly the same, 3-minute cooldown, instant, bombard the target for 40 seconds. And then Mastery, Dreadblade increases all shadow damage done by 20%. Outbreak deals 38% of attack power shadow damage and surrounds the target in a miasma. Miasma? I don't know what they're talking about. I don't have asthma. Lasting for 6 seconds that causes the target and all nearby enemies to be infected with virulent plague, I think is how you pronounce that. Man, I am just slacking on the English tonight. Virulent Plague, a disease that deals 24% of attack power shadow damage every 3 seconds for 21 seconds. It erupts when the infected target dies, dealing 45% of attack power shadow damage split evenly between nearby enemies. The disease also has a 30% chance to erupt each time it deals damage. So, I mean, with a 6-second cooldown, Outbreak is being completely reworked. And is that something you're going to want to cast on the target when they're getting close to death, or do you just want to keep that on the target at all times because more dot damage? I would imagine you'd want to keep it up on targets because just more dot damage, and then you just eventually reap the effects of targets dying as long as you have it on there. But interesting. And then Army of the Dead summons a legion of ghouls over 4 seconds who will fight for the Death Knight for 40 seconds, swarming the enemy, fighting anything they can. And it's a 10-minute cooldown, and it does have a 3-rune cost. That alone is going to be kind of cool with the Unholy Death Knight weapon, having a chance to proc Army of the Dead anyways. So talk about army upon army upon army. That'd be kind of cool. So, with abilities done now, let's go ahead and take a look at talents. In our first tier of talents, we're looking at All Will Serve. Your Raise Dead spell summons an additional skeletal minion, and its cooldown is removed. So that's kind of cool. So, Raise Dead no longer has a 1-minute cooldown, which is kind of cool. And then it's going to summon 2 instead of 1. So again, definitely emphasizing that minion-style gameplay of Unholy Death Knights. Bursting Sores. When a Festering Wound bursts, it also deals 20% of its normal damage to all enemies within 8 yards of the target. And then Ebon Fever. Virulent Plague deals its damage 50% more frequently. So again, you're getting almost 3, just right off the bat, you're getting 3 different play styles there, and I don't necessarily know which one will be better. I'm having a hard time discerning between those 3. Honestly, any of them sound decent. It really seems to depend on what kind of gameplay style you're going to go for. I mean, this basically looks like it's going to be more of a single target dot play style, emphasis on more AoE, and then just a minion style gameplay. Which, if that's how that breaks down, that's kind of cool. I like that already in that first tier, we're seeing options for different styles of gameplay. Which one will take precedence in a PvP situation, I don't really know. I mean, I like the idea of 2 minions. That's pretty dope. But again, we'll just have to wait and see what the rest of these look like, what best in slot's going to be. Hopefully, you're able to do different builds with this. So I'm really hoping we're going to begin to see different types of builds being able to be coming back in World of Warcraft, so that you're able to kind of stand out a little bit from other Death Knights and say, well, I'm playing a minion build or something along those lines. And whatever it's called, I doubt that, but or I'm playing a single target dot build, or I'm playing an AoE type build. Things like that I think would be really cool to see. Initially, I am liking the idea of All Will Serve or Ebon Fever just on a personal preference level. Bursting Swords doesn't sound bad either, but either of those two I'm a big fan of. 57, Infected Claws. Your Ghoul's Claw attack now has a 50% chance to cause Festering Wound on the target. Oh, so that's kind of cool. So Just again, more emphasis on that dot, and it's kind of bridging that gap between heavy, dot class and pet class, which is pretty nifty as well. Pustules. Wow, that's a lot of P's. Festering Strike now applies 1 to 5 Festering Wounds. Oh, the runic power gained from triggering a Festering Wound is increased by 3. Blighted Rune Weapon. Your next 5 successful auto attacks infect your target with a Festering Wound. Interesting. So, Festering Wound. So, I mean, this whole tier here is all about how you want to apply Festering Wounds, or what you want to use to apply more Festering Wounds. Now, if you're using All Will Served, maybe Infected Claw would be the better chance, since you're going to have 2 ghouls out. Unless the skeletal minion doesn't count for that. If that's the case, I could see Pestilent Pustules being decent. And of course, the next successful auto attacks, not bad either. So I'm very curious. I think I like Pestilent Pustules right there, partly because it's just fun to say. But yeah, I don't know. This would be really cool. These comboed off each other, but I don't think they will, since it specifically mentions ghouls, and this talent specifically mentions your summon Raise Dead summons a skeletal minion. So that's yet to be seen. So I'm doubting these two will work together, though. It would be really cool. Unholy Frenzy. Wait. They brought the spell back. They just changed how it works. That's disappointing. Unholy Frenzy. When a Festering Wound bursts, your ghoul gains 100% increased attack speed for 3 seconds. Castigator. Each Scourge Strike critical strike bursts an additional Festering Wound. Interesting. Clawing Shadows. Cost 1 rune. Deals 200% of attack power, shadow damage to the target, and trigger a single attack of Festering Wound if it is present on the target. And this replaces Scourge Strike. Interesting. Very interesting. This is kind of disappointing that it's not how Unholy Frenzy used to work. This one isn't bad either. I'd be curious to see what the damage looks like replacing Scourge Strike. Interesting. In our 60 tier, now we have Sludge Belcher. Raise Dead now summons an abomination instead of a ghoul, which improve. Oh wow, see, that's kind of cool. That I want to check out. That would be. I'd be curious to see if this is going to be more of a tanking pet. It seems like it would be more of a tanking type pet rather than just a DPS pet, but who knows? So again, getting a feel for some different styles of playstyle here, because we're looking at the pet build here, and then Asphyxiate instead is a 2-minute cooldown. Channel dark energies that lift the enemy target off the ground, crushing their throat and stunning them for 6 seconds, or until your channel ends. Can be channeled while moving. And then lastly, debilitating infestation. All enemies infected by outbreak are snared by 50% for 3 seconds. Oh, interesting. So that's quite a bit of utility to outbreak. Some decent damage and some utility. That's interesting. Just out of curiosity, I'm definitely looking at Sludge Belcher first for my initial choice on this talent, simply because I just want to know what that gameplay style is going to look like. Again, with All Will Serve, so you're still going to get the 2 minions. You're just going to get one of them now as a abomination. So that should be interesting. I'd be curious if, just kind of imagining what the abomination skill set would be. I would imagine some kind of actual barf attack, basically, which is disgusting. But there's that. Might apply a dot. I would be very surprised if they don't include the hook attack, where you're allowed to throw the hook, and it basically functions very similar to a death grip for the abomination. Maybe a stun, something like a ground pound or something like that. I could see being a thing. So that's curious. I'll have to wait and see. But I'm definitely interested in that gameplay style for sure. In our 75 tier, we have Meat Shield, instant on a 1-minute cooldown for the next 10 seconds. 90% of all damage you take is transferred to your ghoul. If your ghoul is slain while this ability is active, it cannot be resummoned for 30 seconds. Interesting. Still, 30 seconds isn't bad, on top of, especially if you take All Will Serve, removes the cooldown, so you only have to wait that 30 seconds. Spell Eater, your anti-magic shell is 20% larger and lasts 5 seconds longer. That's kind of cool. Death's Flight. It's a 1.5-minute cooldown. An instant. Pull yourself to the location of a friendly player or pet. Oh. And that replaces Death Grip. So interesting. So you're no longer allowed to grip enemies to you, but you're allowed to use this to pull yourself toward a friendly player. I'm curious how that will change gameplay. I mean, It turns it into more of a defensive cooldown for sure. But I think it also adds some better utility for being able to peel for your healer or arena partner, whatever that is. On just a personal, preference level, and just being able to contribute and keep myself alive, meat shield doesn't sound too bad either, especially if we're just going for an gnarly pet build. I can see that being a thing. I don't know if I'd ever take Death's Flight. I don't know if that would be something I'd ever be interested in. I don't know if it's worth it to me to lose Death Grip. I mean, if it turns out to be best in slot, then I guess I can learn to play it, but I just can't see that being... Like, I'm trying to think of situations where that'd be good in battlegrounds, rated battlegrounds, or arenas. I mean, again, aside from pulling yourself to your healer or a, twos partner or whatever it is, so you can maybe drop anti-magic shell or zone, drop stuff to help peel. I don't know, but other than that, it just doesn't sound as good as everything else. It doesn't sound initially like it's worth replacing Death Grip for. Shadow Infusion. Dealing damage with Death Coil will decrease the cooldown of Dark Transformation by 2 seconds. Interesting, that's no longer baseline anymore. Necrosis. Death Coil now has a 25% chance to cause virulent... Man, I already said that earlier. I'm still screwing it up. Virulent Plague to erupt when it damages infected enemies. So adding a little more functionality to Death Coil there, and then Profane Pathogens. Cause all of your Virulent Plague effects to instantly erupt. Ooh, 2 runes, instant cast, no cooldown. That's intense. So, I mean, you can essentially get a whole bunch of, like, buildups on the Virulent Plague and then just burst them all for a heavier burst. That's interesting. In our 100 tier now we're getting Dark Arbiter. On a 3-minute cooldown, it summons a Valkyrie to assist you in combat. The Valkyrie grows more powerful as you spend runic power. Oh, and that replaces Gargo. That's dope! Like, I heard... Like, this was an ability that Death Knights were going to get, but I hadn't really done any research into it yet until this video, so that's kind of cool. I want to mess around with that. Defile. 1 rune, 30-second cooldown, replaces Death and Decay. Defiles the ground targeted by the Death Knight for 10 seconds every 1 second. If there are any enemies standing in Defile, it deals 33.3% of attack power, Shadow Frost damage to them, burst a Festering Wound, and grows in radius and damage by 2.5%. And then, of course, lastly, Soul Reaper, which is unfortunate that it is a talent now, no longer baseline. But it does cost 1 rune, has a 20-second cooldown, strikes an enemy for 85% physical damage. After 5 seconds, up to 3 festering wounds on the target will burst. So it's been completely reworked anyways. It's not even really functioning as an execute, though I could see it being useful in an execute type situation, but it's no longer going to attempt to kill the target necessarily. So there's that. But all in all, initially, I mean... Soul Reaper could be good just because, again, it's going to add more dot damage, but then the Dark Arbiter sounds extremely fun to me, and I want to mess with that playstyle. Just completely rework all the pets we're working with here. 2 ghouls, summon a abomination instead of a ghoul. Use them all as a meat shield, especially if you're going to take Sludge Belcher. I can imagine if it does function as a tank pet, it's going to have a higher amount of health, so meat shield will probably be more effective. I mean, I don't even know. Shadow Infusion, probably. And then just that Dark Arbiter. So all that sounds pretty sweet, I'm not going to lie. So, now that we're done taking a look at our abilities and baseline talents, let's go ahead and take a look at the Unholy Death Knight PvP tree. With Unholy Death Knights, as with every other PvP tree, we're getting the same 3 talents up top here. Gladiator's Medallion, Adaptation, and Relentless. Basically, probably be going with Gladiator's Medallion or Relentless. Still, Adaptation, as always, really doesn't appeal to me all that much. So we'll take Gladiator's Medallion there. Train of Thought, damage increased by 15%. Being attacked will cancel this effect for 8 seconds. Mind Quickness increases haste by 15%, and Initiation critical strike chance or critical chance increased by 30% on targets at or above 80% health. If Unholy Death Knights function similar to how they are already functioning, I will definitely be taking the haste talent right there off the bat. Cadaverous Pallor. Damage taken from magical to critical strikes are converted into a disease on yourself, dealing nature damage over time. And then Dark Simulacrum basically functions exactly the same, I would imagine, since there's no text on it, unfortunately. And then Anti-Magic Zone places an Anti-Magic Zone for 5 seconds that reduces spell damage taken by party or raid members by 60 seconds. I kind of like that one, I'm not going to lie. Instead of taking massive crits, basically it's going to turn into a dot. And if that's the case, then you could probably just absorb it better with Anti-Magic Shield anyways. Necrotic Aura, all enemies within 10 yards take 5% increased magical damage. Heartstop Aura increases the cooldown of all abilities by 30% to all enemies within 10 yards. And then Decomposing Aura, all enemies within 8 yards slowly decay, losing 2% of their max health every 2 seconds, stacks up to 10 times, lasts for 5 seconds. Holy butts. I believe we've gone over these before, but these still look phenomenal. All of these auras look freaking great. Neither of them looks like they're necessarily better than the other one. I feel like they're definitely going to change depending on what comp you are playing with and or against. Right off the bat, I just like the idea of Heartstop Aura, just increasing cooldowns by 30% of all enemies within 10 yards. If you're playing like a huge Shadow Cleave, then Necrotic Aura would be great. And then simply Decomposing Aura sounds great because, again, more dots. More dots! Crypt Fever. Whenever enemies are healed while affected by your Festering Wound, they take 100 shadow damage. Is 100 really accurate, though? 100 seems very minuscule, seemingly like how high health pools are going to be. I like the idea, though. Like, again, it's going to punish people for healing people that are taking dot damage from you. More dots! Pandemic. When you choose Outbreak, all enemies within 40 yards afflicted by your diseases take 168% of spell power, shadow damage, and the duration of your diseases on them are refreshed. And then Wandering Plague. Cost 1 rune, 8-second cooldown, causes 250% of spell power, shadow damage, over 8 seconds, and inflicts the virulent plague every time. Dang it. On the target, when Wandering Plague's duration ends or is dispelled, it jumps to a nearby enemy within 30 yards, afflicting one of your diseases. Lasting for 3 jumps, you can only have 1 Wandering Plague active at any one time. The disease also has... so this almost seems very similar to what the Lich King would cast on you in ICC, possibly. But I really am curious how that's going to play out in game. Inflicts virulent plague on the target. When Wandering Plague's duration ends or is dispelled, it jumps to a nearby enemy within 30 yards, afflicted by one of your diseases. So it picks one of your diseased enemies. So this is basically going to jump around, and it's going to be hard to get away because it's going to... I mean, over 8 seconds maybe, but again, it's like if that's going to get dispelled or it's going to finish up, then it just jumps to the target. So is this pretty much going to be permanent uptime once it's out there? Interesting. I wonder if you can have multiple of these up on different targets, so you can be like, and you get a Wandering Plague, and you get a Wandering Plague, and you get a Wandering Plague, and then there's going to be Wandering Plagues jumping everywhere. Sounds like fun. I'm a fan of it. Unholy Mutation. When your virulent plague is dispelled or ends its duration, a slime spawns, dealing 1000 nature damage and slowing all enemies within 8 yards for 50% for 3 seconds. Wow, the slime lasts for 15 seconds. Deathstone. 3-minute cooldown. It's an instant. Summons a Deathstone at the target location for 3 minutes. The Deathstone will resurrect zombies to attack the enemies within X amount of yards, we'll say every 5 seconds, lasting 3 minutes. When the zombies die, their corpse explodes, dealing damage to enemies within X amount of yards. I wonder if the Deathstone is going to have a health bar so you're able to kill it, or if it just sits there like it is what it is. Either way, sounds kind of cool. Again, completely adding to that minion summon style of gameplay. I want to know, and I want to see how many minions as an Unholy Death Knight I can possibly get on the battlefield. Like, I want to just throw a legion of the undead at my enemy and watch and just laugh as they get, like, their limbs gnawed off. That just sounds hilariously wonderful to me. And last but not least, making its glorious return, Unholy Death Knights Rejoice. Our bread and butter from days past, Necrotic Strike. A vicious strike that deals 50% weapon damage, absorbs the next 100 of 100. How that math works out, again, don't know. Attack power, healing received by the target lasts 10 seconds. Basically, it's a healing eater. Oh, I miss the skill so much. This used to shut down healers so hard. It is beautiful, and I'm so glad it's back. I can tell you right now, I don't even care about Unholy Mutation or Deathstone initially. I'm sure they will be great, and I will probably be checking them out. But just knowing I have the option of having Necrotic Strike back again is glorious. So, that being said, my initial build will honestly probably look something like this for my PvP tree of my Unholy Death Knight. And again, I'm waiting to see what this all looks like. Hopefully getting into beta. I'm still crossing my fingers and praying. But if not, then I'll just have to wait until this all goes live like everybody else. But definitely going to be messing around with a lot of this for sure, and hoping for the best. But initially, looking at this right now, Unholy Death Knights look friggin' fun. Even more so than Frost does, although Frost does look fun as well. But it's nice to see that Unholy is getting some good attention as well. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be last picked for the, for the team, that's for sure. So, with that, that's going to do it for this video. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Shooting for 500 subs come summertime still, so please help me get there if you haven't done so already. For those of you who have, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Don't forget to follow me on all the different social media that is plastered and posted all over this page. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter, which are all linked down below, where you can keep up to date with all the videos I'm posting, so you don't have to wait around. It also gives you another place for you guys to contact me, put in requests or suggestions for videos, and simply strike up a conversation. I'm a big fan of it. You can also follow my Instagram, which is my personal Instagram page. So it has a little bit less to do with gaming, more so to do just kind of with my everyday life. So if you're interested in that, feel free to give me a follow. But yeah, it's going to do it for this one. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.